You can't sit here." She shoved the little girl away, but when her black single dad turned around, the entire room gasped, because the truth about who he really was changed everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Marcus woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window, casting warm patterns on the wall. The familiar sound of cartoons drifted up from downstairs. Emily was already awake. He smiled, remembering how his daughter always got up early on weekend mornings, especially when they had plans. He found her curled up on the couch in her pajamas, completely absorbed in her favorite show. Her tight curls were still mussed from sleep, forming a wild halo around her head. "Good morning, sunshine," Marcus said, bending down to kiss the top of her head. Emily looked up with bright eyes. "Morning, Daddy. Is it time to get ready for brunch?" "Almost. Let's have some breakfast first. Can't go to brunch on an empty stomach." He headed to the kitchen, Emily trailing behind him. As he made them both toast and scrambled eggs, Marcus watched his daughter carefully arranging her plate, making sure nothing touched. Some habits never changed. She'd been particular about her food since she was tiny, just like her mother had been. After breakfast, Marcus helped Emily get ready. He'd laid out her new dress the night before, pale yellow with white flowers, carefully ironed and hanging on her closet door. Emily stood very still as he worked on her hair, dividing it into neat sections and weaving them into 2 French braids. "Does it hurt?" he asked softly when she winced. "Just a little. It's okay though. I want to look nice." She fidgeted with the hem of her dress. "Daddy, do you think the other kids will like me?" Marcus's hand stilled for a moment. "Of course they will, baby. You're smart and kind and funny. Just be yourself." But he saw the worry in her eyes through the mirror. Emily had always been sensitive to others' reactions, picking up on the smallest signs of rejection. It reminded him so much of Marie, her mother, who had faced the world with the same gentle spirit. As they drove to the country club, Marcus's mind drifted to conversations he'd had with Marie about raising Emily. "We have to show her everything," Marie had insisted, even when she was sick. "All kinds of places, all kinds of people. That's how she'll learn. She belongs everywhere." Marcus gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. "Your mama was right about that," he said quietly, more to himself than to Emily. Emily looked up from where she'd been watching houses pass by outside her window. "What did you say, Daddy?" "Just thinking about how proud your mama would be of you today. Looking so pretty and being so brave about meeting new people." Emily smiled, but her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. "I miss her." "Me too, baby. Me too." The country club came into view, an impressive building of red brick and white columns, surrounded by perfectly manicured lawns. Marcus pulled into a parking spot and came around to help Emily out of the car. She immediately slipped her small hand into his, holding on tight. As they walked through the entrance, Marcus nodded politely to Mr. Peterson, who was heading out to the golf course, and Mrs. Thompson, who was arranging flowers in the foyer. They'd been among the first to welcome him when he joined the club, though he could still remember the surprise on their faces when he presented his membership card that first time. The main dining room was already filling up with the usual Saturday morning crowd. Sunlight poured through tall windows, gleaming off silverware and crystal water glasses. The smell of coffee and fresh pastries filled the air. Marcus felt Emily's grip tighten as they passed tables of chattering adults. He squeezed her hand back reassuringly. "It's okay, sweetheart. We belong here just as much as anyone else." They found a table near one of the windows, and Marcus helped Emily into her chair. She sat very straight, carefully spreading her napkin in her lap, just like he'd taught her. But her eyes kept drifting to a nearby table where several children around her age were sitting together, laughing and sharing a plate of muffins. After a few minutes of watching them, Emily leaned close to Marcus and whispered, "Daddy, do you think I could go sit with them?" Marcus looked down at his daughter's hopeful face, seeing both fear and courage in her expression. His heart swelled with pride at her bravery, even as it ached with worry about what might happen next. "Of course you can, Emily. Would you like me to walk over with you?" Emily shook her head, straightening her shoulders. "No, I can do it. She smoothed her dress one more time and slid off her chair, though she glanced back at Marcus for reassurance. "Go on," he encouraged softly. "I'll be right here if you need me." Emily's heart fluttered with nervous excitement as she approached the table where 4 children sat eating pancakes and giggling together. Her patent leather shoes clicked softly against the polished floor, each step careful and measured. The morning sunlight streaming through the club's tall windows made the silverware sparkle, and the smell of maple syrup and bacon filled the air. She could do this. Her daddy had always taught her to be brave, even when her tummy felt like it was full of butterflies. The empty chair looked so inviting. Maybe they'd let her join their conversation about the upcoming swim meet she'd overheard. Just as Emily's small hand touched the back of the chair, a sharp voice cut through the air like ice. "You can't sit here." Lillian Whitmore's perfectly manicured hand shot out, pushing Emily's away from the chair. Her red lips curved into a sneer, diamond bracelet catching the light as she withdrew her hand. The children at the table fell silent, their forks frozen midway to their mouths. Emily's chest tightened as though someone had squeezed all the air from her lungs. Her cheeks burned hot, and she could feel everyone's eyes on her. The other kids, the waiters who'd stopped mid-stride, the elderly couple at the next table who'd paused their conversation to stare. The silence in the dining room was deafening. Emily's lower lip trembled as she stood there, her hand still hovering where the chair had been. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear into the thick carpet beneath her feet, but her legs wouldn't move. Marcus had been watching his daughter from across the room, pride swelling in his chest at her courage to approach the other children. But when he heard those cruel words, that pride transformed into a sharp ache that threatened to shatter his composure. He saw the way Emily's shoulders hunched forward, how her head dropped slightly, poses he'd hoped never to see in his confident little girl. The military training kicked in automatically, helping him channel the rage that surged through his body. His steps were measured and deliberate as he crossed the dining room, his polished shoes making no sound on the carpet. His face remained calm, though his jaw clenched slightly. The other patrons watched as Marcus approached, some with sympathy, others with discomfort, and a few with something that looked like shame. He kept his voice steady and gentle as he reached Emily's side, kneeling down beside her. His crisp suit jacket brushed against the carpet as he got to her level, the way he always did when he needed her to feel safe. "Sweetheart, you can always sit with me," Marcus said softly, his warm brown eyes meeting Emily's tear-filled ones. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, feeling her trembling slightly beneath her Sunday dress, the one she'd been so excited to wear this morning. Then Marcus raised his eyes to meet Lillian's, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. His gaze was steady, unflinching, filled with quiet dignity that made Lillian's sneer waver slightly. He didn't need to raise his voice or make a scene. His presence alone commanded attention, speaking volumes about strength and character that no words could convey. The tension crackled between them like electricity. Lillian's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together, her red-painted fingernails drumming against the white tablecloth. But Marcus didn't break his gaze, didn't give her the satisfaction of looking away first. In that moment, the veteran and father faced down the society woman's cruelty with the same courage that had earned him medals overseas. Emily pressed closer to her father's side, drawing comfort from his familiar presence. Her small hand found his larger one, squeezing it the way she always did when she needed reassurance. The dining room remained suspended in that moment, waiting to see what would happen next, as father and daughter stood united against the cold stare of Lillian Whitmore. Marcus rose to his full height, his military bearing evident in his straight spine and squared shoulders. The dining room fell so quiet you could hear the clink of a coffee cup being set down across the room. His expression remained composed, but his eyes held a fierce dignity as he looked directly at Lillian Whitmore. "Mrs. Whitmore," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed space. "I'd like to believe you didn't mean to hurt an 8-year-old child who simply wanted to make friends." He placed a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder, feeling her trembling slightly beneath his touch. Lillian's perfectly made-up face flushed, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "This is a private table," she said, her manicured fingers drumming against the white tablecloth. Every table in this dining room belongs to all members, Marcus replied evenly. And my daughter and I are members. A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. An elderly gentleman at a nearby table nodded firmly, while a young mother pulled out her chair and started to stand, as if ready to offer Emily a seat. Lillian's lips pressed into a thin line. Well, I simply think it's better if certain people... If certain people what, Lillian? A warm, authoritative voice cut through the tension. An elegant older woman in a powder blue dress suit stepped forward from a corner table. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed, but her kind eyes held a spark of steel as she approached. Several people straightened in their seats. This was Evelyn Whitmore, a founding member of the club and a respected figure in the community. She walked directly to Emily, who instinctively pressed closer to Marcus's side. "My dear," Evelyn said, kneeling slightly to meet Emily's eyes, "I would be honored if you and your father would join me for breakfast. I have a lovely table by the window, and I've been sitting there all alone with no one to share my blueberry muffins with." Emily looked up at Marcus, uncertainty written across her face. He gave her an encouraging nod, his heart swelling with gratitude for this unexpected ally. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore," Emily said softly, her manners impeccable even in distress. "I like blueberry muffins." "Wonderful." Evelyn straightened and fixed Lillian with a pointed look. "And please, call me Evelyn. All my friends do." More members were nodding now, and the tension in the room began to ease. A waiter hurried to pull out chairs at Evelyn's table, while another appeared with fresh coffee and a basket of warm muffins. Marcus guided Emily toward their new seats, noting how some color had returned to her cheeks. As they settled in, Evelyn engaged Emily in gentle conversation about school and her favorite books, her warmth drawing tiny smiles from his daughter. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly to Evelyn when Emily became absorbed in selecting a muffin. "Your kindness means more than you know." "Kindness shouldn't be remarkable," Evelyn replied, her voice equally low. "And you've shown admirable restraint in handling this situation." The morning seemed to be returning to normal. The usual buzz of conversation and clinking silverware resumed around them. Emily had taken a small bite of muffin, and Marcus felt his shoulders beginning to relax. Then the double doors to the dining room burst open with a bang. Charles Whitmore stood in the doorway, his face dark with fury. His expensive suit seemed to bristle with indignation as his gaze locked onto Marcus. The CEO's hands were clenched into fists at his sides, and a vein pulsed visibly at his temple. The room fell silent once again as Charles strode toward their table, each footstep echoing against the hardwood floor. Emily dropped her muffin, shrinking back in her chair. Marcus straightened, instinctively moving to shield his daughter from whatever storm was about to break. "What is the meaning of this?" Charles demanded, his voice tight with barely contained rage. He loomed over their table, deliberately ignoring his mother while glaring at Marcus. "I've just been informed there was some sort of disturbance." The morning sun, streaming through the windows, cast harsh shadows across Charles's face, deepening the lines of anger etched there. The pleasant breakfast atmosphere evaporated as quickly as morning dew, replaced by a heavy tension that seemed to press down on everyone in the room. Marcus remained seated, his hand finding Emily's under the table, squeezing it reassuringly. He could feel her small fingers clutching his like a lifeline, and it strengthened his resolve to handle this new challenge with the same dignity he'd shown before. Evelyn set down her coffee cup with a decisive clink. "Charles," she began, but her son cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Mother, please," he snapped, still focused entirely on Marcus. "I want to hear from Mr. Johnson exactly what he thinks he's doing, causing scenes in my club." The possessive pronoun hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt Emily's grip tighten on his hand, and he gave her another gentle squeeze before meeting Charles's hostile gaze with steady eyes. Charles Whitmore burst into the dining room like a storm front, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. His face was flushed with anger, his normally perfectly combed silver hair slightly disheveled as if he'd rushed over at the first whisper of trouble. "What is the meaning of this?" Charles's voice boomed across the room. He moved to stand protectively beside his wife, who immediately straightened in her chair. "Lillian, darling, what happened?" Lillian dabbed at her eyes with a cloth napkin, though there weren't any actual tears. "Oh, Charles, I was just trying to maintain proper order. This gentleman's daughter tried to force her way into sitting with the Petersons' children, and when I politely suggested she might be more comfortable elsewhere, he became quite aggressive." Marcus felt Emily press closer against his leg, her small hand gripping his pants. The lie twisted his stomach, but he kept his expression neutral, remembering the countless times during his military service when keeping calm had been crucial. "That's not what happened, Mr. Whitmore," Marcus said evenly, his deep voice carrying authority without aggression. "Your wife didn't suggest anything politely. She pushed my daughter's hand away and told her she couldn't sit here. There are plenty of witnesses who saw exactly what occurred." Several members nodded in agreement, though most quickly looked away when Charles glared in their direction. Charles's lips curled into a dismissive sneer. "Listen here, Johnson. This is a private club with certain standards. Perhaps you and your daughter would be more comfortable at one of the public recreation centers downtown." He straightened his designer tie. "Some places simply aren't meant for everyone, if you understand my meaning." The words hung in the air like poison. Emily's grip on Marcus's leg tightened, and he could feel her beginning to tremble. She looked up at Charles, then at her father, her young face clouded with confusion and hurt. "Charles Edward Whitmore!" Evelyn's voice cut through the tension like a knife. She rose from her nearby table, her elegant frame radiating disapproval. "I did not raise you to speak to anyone that way, let alone a decorated veteran and his innocent child." The room collectively held its breath. Charles's face reddened further as his mother approached, her heels clicking deliberately across the floor. "Mother, please," Charles hissed. "This is a club matter." "No, this is a matter of basic human decency," Evelyn interrupted, her voice sharp but controlled. "Mr. Johnson and his lovely daughter are members of this club, same as anyone else. The fact that you would even suggest otherwise." She shook her head, genuine pain crossing her features. "I am deeply ashamed of both you and Lillian right now." Lillian's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat. "Evelyn, surely you can't mean—" "I mean exactly what I say," Evelyn cut in. She turned to Emily, her expression softening. "Sweetheart, would you and your father please join me at my table? I would love the company." Emily looked up at Marcus questioningly. He nodded, giving her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Charles's jaw clenched. Though his mother's words had clearly struck home, his position as CEO gave him the last word. "This isn't over, Johnson," he said quietly, for Marcus's ears alone. "You do well to remember who runs this club." The rest of the brunch passed in uncomfortable silence. Despite Evelyn's warm attempts at conversation and the kind smiles she directed at Emily, the weight of Charles's words pressed down on them like a physical thing. Emily picked at her food, her earlier excitement completely extinguished. The sun was setting by the time Marcus and Emily left the club, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. Emily was quiet as Marcus helped her into the car and buckled her seatbelt. The drive home started in silence, broken only by the soft sound of the radio playing gospel music at low volume. They were almost home when Emily's small voice finally broke the silence. "Daddy," she whispered, looking at his reflection in the rearview mirror. "Why don't they want us here?" Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles showed white against his dark skin. The question he'd been dreading since the moment they'd walked into that club had finally come. His heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, knowing that his precious daughter was facing the same prejudices he'd hoped she might be spared. The streetlights cast alternating patterns of light and shadow across Emily's face as they drove, highlighting the confusion and hurt in her eyes. She looked so much like her mother in that moment. The same questioning gaze, the same gentle spirit that seemed to absorb the pain of others. Marcus had to swallow hard past the lump in his throat, forcing himself to keep his eyes on the road while his daughter waited for an answer that no child should ever need to hear. The evening shadows stretched long across Emily's pink bedroom walls as Marcus helped her into her favorite pajamas, the ones with little stars that seemed to twinkle in the darkness. Her small shoulders drooped with exhaustion, the day's events weighing heavily even on her young frame. "Time for bed, sweetheart," Marcus said softly, pulling back her quilted comforter. Emily climbed in, but instead of settling down, she sat up against her pillows, hugging her worn teddy bear close. "Daddy?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Would Mommy have liked the country club?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He sank onto the edge of her bed, the springs creaking gently beneath his weight. Through the window, crickets chirped their evening song, filling the pause as he gathered his thoughts. "Your mommy," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "loved beautiful things. But you know what she loved even more?" He touched Emily's nose gently, making her smile. "She loved beautiful hearts. She always said you could find good people anywhere if you just kept believing in them." Emily's fingers traced the teddy bear's worn ear. "Even at the club?" "Even there," Marcus assured her. "Remember Miss Evelyn, how kind she was to you. That's exactly the sort of person your mommy would have loved to meet." Emily nodded, her eyes growing heavy. "I wish Mommy was here to tell those mean people to be nice." Marcus's heart clenched. He tucked the blanket around her small frame, smoothing it with careful hands. "Your mommy is still with us, baby girl, right here." He placed his hand over her heart, "and she'd be so proud of how brave you were today." Emily's eyes fluttered closed. "Love you, Daddy," she murmured, already drifting off. "Love you too, Princess." Marcus kissed her forehead and quietly left the room, leaving her nightlight casting soft stars across the ceiling. In the hallway, he paused by the family photos. Sarah's smile beamed back at him from their wedding picture, radiant, fearless, full of hope. "I wish you were here," he whispered to her image. "You always knew exactly what to say." In his study, Marcus sank into his old leather chair, the one Sarah had insisted they buy when he first came home from deployment. The room still held traces of her, the curtains she'd picked out, the small crosses she'd collected displayed on the shelf. He bowed his head, hands clasped tight. "Lord," he prayed, his voice barely above a whisper, "give me strength. Not for me, but for Emily. Show me how to protect her heart without teaching her to hide it. Help me help her stand tall without becoming hard." The silence that followed felt heavy with meaning. Marcus remembered Sarah's words from years ago. "Our daughter will face challenges we can't shield her from, but we can teach her that her worth isn't determined by other people's limitations." Reaching for his phone, Marcus scrolled to a familiar name. Mike Torres, his old Army buddy from the 82nd Airborne. Despite the late hour, Mike answered on the second ring. "Brother," Mike's warm voice came through. "I was just thinking about you today." "Mike," Marcus said, his voice catching slightly. "Remember that time in Kandahar when everything seemed impossible? And we made it through anyway," Mike finished. "What's going on, Marcus?" As Marcus recounted the day's events, Mike listened quietly, only interrupting once to mutter something unflattering about Charles Whitmore. When Marcus finished, the line was silent for a moment. "You know what I remember most about you, Marcus?" Mike finally said. "Not just your strength, though God knows you carried half the unit's spirits on your shoulders. It was how you never let the hard stuff make you hard. You stayed human. That's what Emily needs to see now." "I don't want her to feel ashamed, Mike, or afraid." "Then show her there's nothing to be ashamed of," Mike said firmly. "You're Marcus Johnson, combat veteran, devoted father, man of faith. Those country club folks? They don't get to define you, or that beautiful little girl." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Sarah used to say something similar. "Smart woman, you're Sarah." Mike's voice softened. "She'd be proud of how you're handling this, brother. Keep standing tall. That's what you taught all of us to do, remember?" After saying goodbye, Marcus walked quietly back to Emily's room. She lay peacefully asleep, one hand still clutching her teddy bear, her face serene in the gentle glow of her nightlight. Her dark curls, so like her mother's, spread across the pillow like a halo. Standing in the doorway, Marcus watched his daughter sleep. She looked so small, so precious, so unaware of the complexities of the world she was growing up in. Yet there was strength in her too. Sarah's strength, his strength. generations of resilience flowing through her veins. "I'll show them where we belong," he whispered into the quiet room, his promise settling like a blanket of protection over his sleeping child. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of New Hope Baptist Church, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Marcus adjusted his tie as Emily smoothed her yellow dress, the same one she'd worn countless Sundays before. But this morning felt different. The weight of yesterday's incident at the country club still pressed heavy on both their hearts. "Good morning, Brother Marcus," Pastor Williams called out, his warm smile reaching his eyes as he greeted them at the entrance. "Emily, don't you look lovely today?" Emily ducked her head shyly but managed a small smile. Several church members gathered around them, offering gentle touches on the shoulder and words of encouragement. Mrs. Peterson, who had worked at the country club years ago, pulled Marcus aside. "We heard what happened," she whispered, her weathered hand squeezing his arm. "That place hasn't changed much, but you stay strong. We're all behind you." Marcus nodded gratefully, touched by the outpouring of support. The congregation had been his rock since losing Sarah, and now they were rallying around him and Emily once again. As they settled into their usual pew, Marcus noticed a flutter of movement at the back of the church. His breath caught when he recognized Evelyn Whitmore's elegant figure slipping quietly into the last row. She wore a simple navy dress and a small hat, trying to blend in, but her presence sent a ripple of whispers through the congregation. Emily tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, isn't that the nice lady from yesterday?" "Yes, sweetheart," Marcus whispered back, wondering what brought the CEO's mother to their church. The service began, and Pastor Williams' sermon seemed particularly pointed that morning. He spoke about dignity in the face of adversity and the power of grace to transform hearts. Marcus felt the words wash over him like a healing balm, and he noticed Emily sitting up straighter beside him. During the hymns, Emily's clear voice rang out with renewed confidence. Marcus caught her sneaking glances at Evelyn, who stood respectfully during each song, though she didn't know the words. After the final prayer, church members lingered as they always did, sharing news and fellowship. Marcus was speaking with Deacon Thompson when he felt a gentle tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Evelyn standing there, her eyes kind but uncertain. "Mr. Johnson," she said softly, "I hope you don't mind my coming here today. I asked around town where I might find you." Marcus gestured toward a quiet corner near the church garden. "Not at all, Mrs. Whitmore. Would you like to step outside where we can talk?" Emily followed them, holding tight to Marcus's hand but offering Evelyn a shy wave. The morning air was crisp, and the church's rose garden provided a peaceful setting for what promised to be a difficult conversation. First, Evelyn began. "I want to apologize for my son and daughter-in-law's behavior yesterday. It was cruel, inexcusable, and everything that I've tried not to let the club become." Marcus noticed her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. This proud woman was genuinely distressed by what had happened. "I've watched Charles become increasingly difficult over the years," she continued. "But what happened to your precious daughter?" She turned to Emily with genuine warmth in her eyes. "My dear, you deserve so much better than that." Emily's grip on Marcus's hand loosened slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Actually," Evelyn straightened her shoulders, "that's partly why I'm here. The club's annual Veterans Day banquet is coming up next weekend. As a founding member, I'm entitled to bring special guests." She looked directly at Marcus. "I would be honored if you would attend as my personal guest, both of you." Marcus felt Emily's hand tighten again, but this time with excitement rather than anxiety. He studied Evelyn's face, searching for any hint of pity or condescension. He found none, only sincere respect and perhaps a touch of hope. "Mrs. Whitmore," he began carefully, "I appreciate the gesture, but I wouldn't want to create any more tension." "Please," Evelyn interrupted gently. "Call me Evelyn." "And tension already exists, Marcus. Maybe it's time we faced it head on. The club needs to hear voices like yours, especially on Veterans Day." She glanced down at Emily. "And I think a certain young lady deserves to hold her head high in that dining room." Marcus felt torn. Part of him wanted to protect Emily from any possibility of further hurt. But another part remembered Sarah's words about teaching their daughter to stand tall in any room. He looked down at Emily, who was practically bouncing with anticipation. "Can we go, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes shining. "Please?" Marcus took a deep breath. "We would be honored to attend," he said finally. "Thank you, Evelyn." Emily let out a delighted squeal and clapped her hands together, drawing smiles from several church members who were pretending not to eavesdrop. Her face glowed with the first real joy Marcus had seen since the incident. Evelyn's eyes misted over as she watched Emily's excitement. "The honor is mine," she said softly. "And Marcus? Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is show up where we're told we don't belong." The wrought iron gates of Evelyn Whitmore's estate swung open slowly as Marcus's car pulled into the curved driveway. Emily pressed her face against the window, her eyes wide at the sight of the beautiful Tudor-style mansion with its climbing roses and manicured gardens. "It's like a fairy tale house, Daddy," Emily whispered, her breath fogging the glass. Marcus smiled, though his shoulders remained tense. "Remember your manners, sweetheart." They walked up the brick pathway where Evelyn already stood waiting at the front door. She wore a simple blue dress that somehow made her look both elegant and approachable. Her silver hair caught the afternoon sunday. "Welcome, both of you," Evelyn said warmly, extending her arms. "I'm so glad you could come." Emily did a little curtsy, making Evelyn laugh with delight. The sound was musical and genuine, helping Marcus relax slightly. Inside, the house was beautiful but lived in, with comfortable furniture and family photos everywhere. The dining room had been set for afternoon tea, complete with delicate china cups and a 3-tiered tray of small sandwiches and cookies. "I wasn't sure what you liked," Evelyn said, gesturing to the spread. "So I had Mrs. Bennet make a variety." Emily's eyes grew round at the sight of tiny chocolate eclairs. "May I have one, please?" she asked politely. "Of course, dear." Evelyn poured tea into Emily's cup, adding extra milk and sugar. "When I was your age, my grandmother would have tea parties with me every Sunday." "What grade are you in now?" "3rd grade," Emily said, carefully picking up her cup with both hands. "I like my teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. She lets me help pass out the art supplies." "Are you fond of art?" Evelyn asked, genuinely interested. Emily nodded enthusiastically. "I love drawing. Sometimes I draw pictures of Mommy from the photos Daddy shows me." A brief silence fell over the table. Marcus reached for his daughter's hand, but Evelyn spoke first. "I would love to see your drawing sometime, Emily. I used to draw too, though I wasn't very good at it. Mostly horses. I was obsessed with horses at your age." Emily's face lit up. "Really? Did you have a horse?" "I did," Evelyn smiled, reaching for a photo album on the nearby shelf. "Here's my old girl, Pepper. She was black, with a white star on her forehead." As Emily leaned in to look at the photographs, Marcus observed the easy way Evelyn interacted with his daughter. There was nothing forced or patronizing about it. She listened intently to Emily's stories about school and answered her endless questions with patience. After a while, Emily asked to use the bathroom, and Mrs. Bennet, the housekeeper, showed her the way. Once they were alone, the atmosphere shifted slightly. "Marcus," Evelyn said softly, "I want you to know how deeply sorry I am about what happened at the club." Marcus set down his teacup carefully. "You're not responsible for your son's actions, Mrs. Whitmore." "Evelyn, please." She sighed, her fingers tracing the pattern on her napkin. "Charles wasn't always like this. Somewhere along the way, success changed him. The country club, the corporate board meetings, the constant need to prove his importance, it's made him forget what truly matters." She looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes directly. "I've watched him become someone I don't recognize, and I've stayed quiet for too long." What happened to Emily was the final straw. "Why are you helping us?" Marcus asked quietly. "Because it's the right thing to do," Evelyn replied without hesitation. "Because that little girl deserves to walk into any room with her head held high. And because you, Marcus Johnson, have shown more grace and dignity in one morning than my son has shown in years." Marcus felt the sincerity in her words. "The Veterans Day banquet. I'll be right there beside you both," Evelyn assured him. "Charles may be the CEO, but I've been on the board of that club for 30 years. My voice still carries weight, and it's time I used it." Emily's footsteps sounded in the hallway, and she bounced back into the room. "Mrs. Bennet showed me your garden. Can we go see the roses?" "Of course we can," Evelyn smiled, standing up. "I have some special ones I think you'll like. They're yellow with pink edges, like little sunsets." They spent the next hour in the garden, with Evelyn teaching Emily the names of different flowers and sharing stories about planting them. Marcus watched as his daughter soaked up every word, her initial shyness completely gone. As the afternoon light began to fade, Marcus knew it was time to leave. Emily helped Evelyn gather a small bouquet to take home, carefully selecting each flower. At the front door, Emily suddenly threw her arms around Evelyn's waist. "Thank you for the tea party, Grandma Evelyn," she said, her voice muffled against Evelyn's dress. Marcus saw tears spring to Evelyn's eyes as she hugged Emily back. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed Emily's hair, and when she looked up at Marcus, her cheeks were wet. Marcus stood in front of the department store mirror, tugging at the sleeve of a charcoal gray suit. The price tag dangled from the cuff, and he tried not to wince at the numbers. His bank account would take a hit, but some things were worth the sacrifice. "Daddy, you look like a superhero." Emily twirled in her new purple dress, the skirt floating around her like flower petals. Her eyes sparkled with pure joy as she spun, making Marcus's heart swell. The elderly tailor, pins tucked between his lips, made careful marks with chalk. "Stand still, sir," he mumbled through the pins. "Almost done with the adjustments." Marcus caught Emily's eye in the mirror. "What do you think, sweetheart? Is this the one?" "Yes." She stopped spinning long enough to give him 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. "You look so handsome." The tailor stepped back, removing the pins from his mouth. "Your daughter has good taste. This suit fits you perfectly, just needs the sleeves taken up a touch." He patted Marcus's shoulder. "Special occasion?" "Speaking at a Veterans Day banquet tomorrow," Marcus replied, smoothing the lapels. "Ah, military man?" The tailor nodded approvingly. "Thank you for your service. This suit will do you proud." After paying more than he'd planned, but less than he'd feared, Marcus carried their bags to the car. Emily skipped alongside him, still admiring her dress through the clear plastic garment bag. Back home, Marcus hung both outfits carefully in their closets. While Emily worked on her homework at the kitchen table, he retreated to his bedroom and stood before the full-length mirror. The speech notes trembled slightly in his hands. "Distinguished guests," he began, then shook his head. Too formal. He tried again. "Friends and neighbors. Better, but still not quite right." A small movement caught his eye in the mirror. Emily stood in the doorway watching him with curious eyes. "Are you practicing, Daddy?" "Sure am, baby girl. Want to be my audience?" She nodded eagerly and perched on the edge of his bed, hands folded in her lap just like they'd taught her in school. Marcus cleared his throat and started again. "When I think about service to our country, I think about family." His voice gained strength as he continued, sharing stories of brotherhood forged in difficult times, out of sacrifice and honor, and coming home changed but stronger. Emily listened intently, occasionally whispering, "That's good, Daddy," or "I like that part." Her presence steadied him, reminded him why this speech mattered so much. The phone rang, interrupting his practice. It was James, his old army buddy. "Just checking in on you, brother." James's familiar voice came through the speaker. "Ready for tomorrow?" Marcus sank into the armchair by the window. "Getting there. Been practicing the speech. Remember what I told you, your story matters. Those country club folks need to hear it. Need to see what real courage and dignity look like." "I keep thinking about Emily," Marcus admitted quietly, watching his daughter who had pulled out her coloring book. "Want to make her proud. You already do, every single day." James's voice softened. "Just speak from the heart. Tell them about serving with honor, about raising that beautiful girl of yours. Show them who you really are." They talked a while longer, James sharing memories that made Marcus laugh, reminding him of the strength they'd found in each other during tough times. By the time they hung up, Marcus felt steadier, more certain. The evening passed quietly. They had dinner, Emily's favorite spaghetti and meatballs, and then she helped him polish his dress shoes until they gleamed. As bedtime approached, Marcus followed their usual routine: teeth brushing, story time, prayers. Emily snuggled under her butterfly-patterned comforter, her brown eyes serious. "Daddy, are you nervous about tomorrow?" Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, considering the question. "A little bit," he admitted. "But that's okay. Sometimes being nervous means something matters to us." She reached for his hand. "You're going to do great. I just know it." Marcus leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Tomorrow we'll stand tall together, baby girl." He smoothed her hair back, his heart full of love for this precious child who gave him courage every day. Time for sleep now. Emily yawned and closed her eyes, still holding his hand. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, sweetheart." Sweet dreams. The grand ballroom of the country club sparkled with red, white, and blue decorations. American flags draped elegantly from the ceiling, and crisp white tablecloths adorned every table. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the polished wooden dance floor, where small spotlights created pools of golden light. Marcus adjusted his new tie, his palms slightly damp. Emily's small hand squeezed his, and he looked down to see her beaming up at him in her navy blue dress with white polka dots. Her hair was styled in neat braids, tied with matching ribbons. "Ready, sweetheart?" he asked softly. Emily nodded, her eyes wide with excitement. "Yes, Daddy." Evelyn stepped up beside them, elegant in a silver evening gown. Her presence carried authority, yet her smile was warm and encouraging. "Shall we make our entrance?" she asked, placing a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. As they walked through the grand double doors together, the low hum of conversation suddenly dropped. Heads turned, and gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcus held his head high, remembering his military training. Emily straightened her spine too, mimicking her father's dignified posture. Some club members whispered behind their hands, others stared openly. But Evelyn's presence beside them seemed to dare anyone to make an unkind comment. She guided them to the head table, where place cards marked their seats of honor. "Ladies and gentlemen," the evening's host announced, "please welcome our special guest speaker, Army veteran Marcus Johnson." The applause was polite but reserved. Marcus kissed Emily's cheek before making his way to the podium. Under the bright lights, he could see every face in the crowd. Some looked curious, others uncertain. In the back, Charles Whitmore sat with his arms crossed, his expression hard as stone. Marcus took a deep breath and began. "When I was serving overseas, I learned something important about unity." His voice carried clear and strong across the silent room. "In the heat of battle, it doesn't matter what color your skin is, what neighborhood you grew up in, or how much money your family has. What matters is the person next to you, watching your back, fighting for the same flag." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I've seen men from all walks of life risk everything to save each other. Rich men carrying wounded poor men through gunfire. Black men giving blood to save white men. Because in those moments, we understood what really matters, our shared humanity." Marcus's eyes found Emily, who sat straight and proud beside Evelyn. "I'm here tonight not just as a veteran, but as a father. Every day, I try to teach my daughter the values I learned in service, courage, integrity, and respect for all people. When I look at her, I see the future we fought for." His voice grew softer, more personal. "My late wife used to say that the greatest battle isn't fought with weapons, but with hearts and minds. She believed in a world where our daughter would be judged not by the color of her skin, but by the content of her character." Tears glistened in several eyes now. Even some of the most resistant club members seemed moved. The sacrifice of veterans isn't just about the past. It's about building a better future. A future where all our children can sit together, learn together, and grow together in peace. Marcus's voice strengthened with conviction. "That's why I stand here tonight. Not to divide, but to unite. Not to blame, but to build bridges. Because the America we fought for is big enough for all of us. And the future our children deserve is one where every door is open, every table has room, and every heart is welcome." The silence that followed his final words was profound. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the room, a chair scraped back. Someone stood up, clapping. Like a wave, others rose to their feet. Soon the entire ballroom thundered with applause. Emily jumped up, clapping wildest of all, her face glowing with pride. Evelyn stood beside her, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Veterans in the crowd rendered sharp salutes. Even some of Charles's closest allies were on their feet, moved despite themselves. Marcus caught sight of Emily's radiant smile through the standing crowd. She looked exactly like her mother in that moment, full of joy and hope. The applause continued, washing over him like a warm tide. When he returned to his seat, Emily threw her arms around his neck. "That was amazing, Daddy," she whispered fiercely. "Thank you, baby girl," he murmured, holding her close. Evelyn squeezed his arm. "You've given them something to think about, Marcus, something they needed to hear." As the applause finally faded and people began to settle back into their seats, Marcus felt the weight of a cold stare. He looked up to find Charles Whitmore watching him from across the room, his jaw clenched and his eyes filled with unmistakable anger. The morning sun filtered through Marcus's kitchen window, but its warmth couldn't reach the chill that spread through him as he scrolled through his phone. Text messages and social media posts twisted his heartfelt speech into something ugly. His fingers trembled slightly as he read Charles Whitmore's latest post, "Shocked to witness such a transparent attempt to manipulate our members. Some people will say anything for attention and handouts. Number, not fooled." Marcus set his coffee mug down harder than he meant to, the dark liquid sloshing against the sides. He'd expected pushback from Charles, but this was different. This was calculated destruction. More messages poured in. Some club members who'd smiled and shaken his hand after the speech were now sharing Charles's posts, adding their own snide comments. The words blurred together, playing the victim, using his status, "doesn't understand our traditions." Emily bounced into the kitchen, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Ready for school, Daddy?" Her smile faded when she saw his face. "What's wrong?" Marcus forced a smile, quickly tucking his phone away. "Nothing, baby. Just some grown-up stuff." He grabbed his car keys. "Let's get you to school." The drive was quiet, Emily humming softly to the radio while Marcus's mind raced. At the school drop-off, he noticed some of the other parents averting their eyes, parents who were also club members. "Have a good day, sweetheart," he called as Emily hopped out. She waved back, her braids bouncing as she joined the stream of students heading inside. Back home, Marcus's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Even some of his fellow veterans had received messages from Charles, questioning Marcus's service record and intentions. The lies were spreading like poison. He called Evelyn, needing someone who understood the situation. "Marcus," her voice was heavy with concern, "I've seen what Charles is doing. It's despicable. I didn't want any of this, Evelyn. I just wanted Emily to feel." "I know, dear. Charles has always been threatened by anyone who challenges his authority. But using social media to attack a veteran and his child?" She sighed deeply. "I raised him better than this." The day crawled by in a haze of angry messages and worried calls from friends. Marcus tried to focus on his work-from-home job, but each notification made his stomach twist. When it was time to pick up Emily, he noticed she was quieter than usual. Her usual stream of chatter about her day was replaced with single-word answers and long silences. At home, she went straight to her room, claiming she had homework. Marcus knew something was wrong, but he gave her space, busying himself with dinner preparations. Then he heard it, muffled sobs coming from upstairs. Marcus took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding. Outside Emily's door, he could hear her crying harder than he'd heard since her mother's funeral. "Emily?" He knocked softly. "Baby, what's wrong?" The crying continued. He pressed his ear to the door and heard her trying to catch her breath between sobs. "Can I come in?" No answer, just more crying. Marcus slid down to sit with his back against the door, his chest aching. "I'm right here, sweetheart. whenever you're ready to talk." Finally, Emily's trembling voice came through the door. "Katie and Madison were whispering about you today." Her words were punctuated by hiccups. They said you were just pretending to be a hero for attention, that you're looking for handouts." Marcus closed his eyes, fighting back his own tears. Those girls' parents were club members, no doubt repeating Charles's lies at home. "Their mom said we don't deserve to be at the club," Emily continued, her voice breaking. "That you're making everybody uncomfortable." Marcus pressed his palm against the door, wishing he could reach through and hold her. "Emily, baby, those people are wrong. They're saying mean things because they're afraid of change." "But why?" Emily's voice cracked. "Why do they hate us so much?" Marcus's throat tightened. He remembered similar conversations with his own father years ago, the same pain, the same questions without good answers. "I wish." Emily's voice was barely a whisper now, choked with tears. "I wish I wasn't different." Those words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He leaned his head back against the door, feeling tears roll down his cheeks. Everything he'd tried to protect her from, everything he and her mother had wanted to spare her from, it was happening anyway. He sat there in silence, listening to his daughter's sobs, feeling more helpless than he had in any combat situation. In war, he'd known who the enemy was, known how to fight back. But how could he fight against whispers and lies? How could he protect Emily's heart from people who saw her difference as a reason to exclude her? The hallway grew darker as the sun set, but Marcus didn't move. He stayed there, guardian at his daughter's door, while memories of his late wife flooded his mind. She would have known what to say, how to heal Emily's wounded spirit. She had always been better at finding the right words. Emily's crying gradually quieted to occasional sniffles. Still, Marcus waited, sending up silent prayers for guidance, for strength, for the wisdom to help his daughter through this crisis of spirit. The house settled into evening silence, broken only by the soft sound of Emily's breathing through the door. Marcus remained seated on the floor, his back aching, his heart hurting even more. He thought about the proud smile on Emily's face during his speech, now shattered by cruel whispers and prejudice, masked as tradition. His phone buzzed again in his pocket, but he ignored it. Nothing Charles or his followers could say mattered more than the pain in his daughter's voice, the defeat in those 5 devastating words. "I wish I wasn't different." The evening settled over the neighborhood like a heavy blanket, wrapping Marcus's modest house in long shadows. He sat alone on his front porch, head buried in his weathered hands. The wooden steps creaked beneath him as he shifted his weight, his broad shoulders slumped under an invisible burden. The distant rumble of traffic, mixed with the gentle chirping of crickets, reminding him of nights in Afghanistan, those endless hours of waiting, listening, wondering if the next moment would bring chaos. But this battle felt different. Back then, the enemy had been clear, the mission defined. Now, he was fighting shadows, whispers, sneers, and cold stares that wounded his little girl's heart more deeply than any physical blow could. Marcus lifted his head and gazed at the darkening sky. The memory of exploding mortars and desperate cries of wounded soldiers flickered through his mind. He'd faced death without flinching, led men through hellfire, but watching Emily's tears today had broken something inside him. Her words echoed in his thoughts. "I wish I wasn't different." The porch light buzzed softly above him, attracting moths that danced in lazy circles. Emily was finally asleep upstairs, exhausted from crying. He'd held her until her tears stopped, whispering stories about her mother, about strength, about belonging. But doubt gnawed at him now. Was he right to keep fighting? Maybe it would be easier to walk away, find somewhere else to build their life, somewhere Emily wouldn't have to face such cruelty. The sound of footsteps on the sidewalk drew his attention. Sarah Martinez, their neighbor from 3 houses down, approached with a covered dish in her hands. Her silver hair caught the glow of the streetlights, and her kind face wore a determined expression. "Marcus," she called softly, climbing the porch steps. "I thought you might need this tonight." She held out a steaming casserole, the aroma of home-cooked comfort food wafting through the evening air. "Mrs. Martinez, you didn't have to," Marcus started to protest, but she cut him off with a gentle wave of her hand. "Listen to me, young man," she said, settling beside him on the steps. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 40 years. I've watched you raise that beautiful daughter of yours all by yourself, the way you love her, the way you carry yourself with such dignity." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "We see you, Marcus. We're proud of you." The simple words hit him like a physical force, and Marcus had to blink back sudden tears. Mrs. Martinez patted his arm and stood, leaving the casserole beside him. "Your Emily reminds me so much of my Elena at that age," she added. "So sensitive, so aware of everything around her. But that sensitivity, it becomes their strength, you'll see." After she left, Marcus remained on the porch, the warm casserole dish a reminder of unexpected kindness. The night deepened around him, and he found himself doing what he always did in moments of crisis. He prayed. "Lord," he whispered into the darkness, "give me wisdom. Show me how to protect her without teaching her to hide. Help me be strong enough for both of us." As he prayed, memories of Rachel, his late wife, flooded back. Her last days in the hospital had been filled not with fear, but with fierce determination. "Don't let them tell Emily where she belongs," she'd insisted, her voice weak, but her eyes blazing. "Show her." Marcus remembered how Rachel had faced every challenge with unshakable faith in God, in people's capacity for good, in the power of standing firm in the face of adversity. She'd known, somehow, that Emily would need these lessons. The night air grew cooler, and distant thunder rolled across the sky. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling Rachel's presence almost tangibly in that moment. She'd always said that storms didn't last forever, that the sun would eventually break through. Emily's window upstairs still glowed softly. She'd asked to keep her nightlight on tonight. Marcus thought about her brave little heart, how she tried so hard to understand a world that sometimes seemed determined to reject her. He thought about Charles Whitmore's sneering face, about the whispers and pointed fingers, about all the battles still to come. But something was shifting in his chest, a familiar feeling he recognized from his military days, the calm certainty that came with knowing exactly what had to be done. This wasn't just about a country club membership or social standing. This was about Emily's future, about her right to walk through the world with her head held high. Marcus straightened his back, feeling strength flow back into his tired muscles. The words came unbidden to his lips, barely more than a breath in the night air. "I won't give up." The morning sun cast long shadows across the country club's parking lot as Marcus guided his car into a space. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, and he drew in a deep breath before turning to Emily in the back seat. "Ready, sweetheart?" he asked, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. Emily nodded, though her small fingers fidgeted with the hem of her dress. "Will Mrs. Evelyn be there?" "Yes, she will." Marcus smiled, trying to project confidence he didn't quite feel. The past few days had been a storm of whispers and sideways glances, but Evelyn's steady presence had been their anchor. They walked through the club's entrance, Marcus's shoes clicking against the polished marble floor. The lobby was quieter than usual, with only a few members scattered about. Some turned away when they saw him, but others, to his surprise, offered small nods of acknowledgement. "Mr. Johnson?" a voice called out softly. Marcus turned to see Richard Cooper, one of the senior board members, approaching with purpose in his stride. Marcus instinctively drew Emily closer, but Richard's face held no malice. "Could we speak privately for a moment?" Richard glanced at Emily. "Perhaps your daughter would like to visit the children's library. Sarah is working there today. She's wonderful with kids." Marcus looked down at Emily, who gave him a small nod. "Go ahead, sweetheart. I'll be right here." They watched as Emily made her way to the library, her patent leather shoes tapping softly against the floor. Once she was out of earshot, Richard's professional demeanor softened. "Listen, Johnson," he began, his voice low but clear. "What Charles did, what he's doing, it's not sitting right with a lot of us. This club was founded on principles of community and respect." Marcus stood quietly, taking in Richard's words. Another member, Janet Williams, approached them, her tennis racket still in hand. "He's right," Janet added, joining their conversation. Charles has become increasingly difficult over the years. But what he did to your daughter? She shook her head. That crossed a line. Before Marcus could respond, more members gathered around them. Tom Fletcher, who rarely spoke at meetings, cleared his throat. My father helped build this place, he said, his weathered face serious. He'd be ashamed to see what's happening now. The support, though unexpected, warmed something in Marcus's chest. These weren't just empty words. He could see the genuine concern in their eyes, hear the conviction in their voices. Mrs. Henderson, who had been at the club longer than almost anyone, spoke up next. Charles thinks his money gives him the right to treat people however he wants, but some of us remember when this club was about bringing people together, not pushing them apart. The conversation continued in hushed tones, with more members sharing their frustrations about Charles's leadership and their admiration for how Marcus had handled himself. It wasn't everyone. Some members still walked past with averted eyes, but it was more support than he'd dared to hope for. Evelyn's arrival created a slight stir. She moved through the group with grace, greeting everyone warmly before coming to stand beside Marcus. Her presence seemed to lend weight to the gathering, her years of respect within the community evident in how others deferred to her. I've requested time to speak at next week's board meeting, she announced, her voice carrying quiet authority. And I'd like you all to be there. Marcus turned to her, surprised. Evelyn, you don't have to. She raised a hand, stopping him. Marcus, trust me on this. Some things need to be said, and I'm the one who needs to say them. Emily returned from the library then, clutching a book to her chest. She moved immediately to Marcus's side, but her face brightened when she saw Evelyn. The older woman reached out to squeeze her hand. The board meeting is scheduled for next Thursday evening, Evelyn continued, looking around at the gathered members. I trust I'll see you all there? Nods and murmured agreements followed. As the group dispersed, Marcus felt Emily's small hand slip into his. He looked down to see her watching everything with those observant eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. You okay? He asked softly. Emily nodded, leaning against him. Sarah showed me a book about butterflies, she said. Did you know they have to fight their way out of their cocoon to get stronger? Marcus exchanged a look with Evelyn, who smiled knowingly. Is that so? He asked. Emily clutched his hand tighter. And if someone helps them too much, their wings won't be strong enough to fly. The wisdom in her simple words struck Marcus deeply. He squeezed her hand back, grateful for her presence, for her strength that sometimes seemed beyond her years. Evelyn touched his arm gently. The meeting starts at 7 next Thursday, she said. We'll face whatever comes together. As they prepared to leave, Marcus noticed more subtle signs of support. A friendly wave from the front desk staff, a door held open, a smile from a passing member. The atmosphere had shifted, even if only slightly. The coming board meeting loomed ahead, but for the first time in days, it felt less like a threat and more like an opportunity. Emily skipped a few steps ahead as they walked to their car, her earlier shyness temporarily forgotten. Marcus watched her, his heart full of love and determination. Whatever happened at the board meeting, he knew they weren't alone anymore. Sometimes support came from unexpected places, and sometimes it took a storm to show you who would stand with you in the rain. The mahogany doors of the country club's boardroom stood imposingly before Marcus as he straightened his tie one last time. Emily squeezed his hand, looking up at him with those big brown eyes that held all his hope. You've got this, Daddy, she whispered. Inside, the boardroom buzzed with hushed conversations. Heavy curtains filtered the morning light, casting a somber glow across the long table where 24 board members sat in leather chairs. Family portraits of past club presidents lined the walls, their stern faces watching the scene unfold. Charles Whitmore sat at the head of the table, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. His wife Lillian perched beside him, her manicured nails drumming against the polished wood. The sound echoed through the room like tiny hammers driving nails into Marcus's resolve. Marcus took his seat near the middle of the table, keeping his posture straight despite the weight of disapproving stares. Emily settled into a chair against the wall behind him, her small hands folded neatly in her lap, just as they'd practiced. Let's begin, Charles announced, his voice carrying that familiar note of superiority. "We're here to discuss the unfortunate situation regarding Mr. Johnson's membership." He shuffled some papers, though Marcus knew it was just for show. "Given recent events and concerns raised by several members, if I may interrupt." Evelyn's voice cut through the tension like a sword through silk. She rose from her chair, elegant in her navy dress, her silver hair catching the light. The room fell silent. Charles's smile faltered. "Mother, the agenda can wait," Evelyn finished firmly. She moved to stand at the center of the room, commanding attention without raising her voice. "I've been a member of this club for 53 years. I watched my husband serve as president for 15 of those years. And never," her voice caught slightly, "never have I been more disappointed in what we've become." Murmurs rippled through the room. Charles's jaw tightened, but he didn't dare interrupt his mother. "This club was founded on principles of excellence, yes," Evelyn continued, her eyes sweeping the room, "but also on principles of dignity and respect. My husband understood that true excellence comes not from excluding others, but from lifting each other up." She walked slowly around the table, making eye contact with each member. "I've watched Marcus Johnson these past months. I've seen him teach his daughter to hold her head high when others would have her bow it. I've seen him respond to cruelty with grace, to prejudice with dignity." Evelyn paused beside Emily, placing a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "And this child, this beautiful, innocent child, what have we taught her about who she is, about her worth?" Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One woman dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "My son," Evelyn said, turning to face Charles directly, "believes that power comes from pushing others down. He's forgotten, or perhaps I failed to teach him, that true strength lies in lifting others up." Charles's face reddened. Lillian reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Marcus Johnson served our country with honor," Evelyn continued, her voice growing stronger. "He's raised a daughter who shows more grace at 8 years old than some of us have managed in a lifetime. And yet we sit here, ready to vote him out because his presence makes some of us uncomfortable?" She shook her head slowly. "If that's what this club has become, then perhaps it's not Marcus who doesn't belong here." The silence that followed felt electric. Marcus felt Emily's small hand slip into his, and he squeezed it gently. "This isn't about politics or social statements," Evelyn said, softening her tone. "It's about basic human dignity. It's about looking at ourselves in the mirror and knowing we chose to be better than our prejudices." She returned to her seat, smoothing her dress. "That's all I have to say." The room erupted in whispers. Board members leaned toward each other, speaking in urgent tones. Marcus kept his eyes forward, his expression calm, though his heart raced. Charles gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "This is outrageous," he sputtered. "Mother, you're letting emotion cloud your judgment. We have standards." "Standards of what, Charles?" A senior board member spoke up, his voice gravelly with age. "Standards of character? Because from where I sit, Mr. Johnson has shown nothing but the highest standards." More voices joined in, the tide of opinion visibly shifting. Charles's face darkened as he watched his sure victory crumbling. The smirk that had seemed so permanent just minutes ago had vanished entirely, replaced by a scowl that deepened with each supportive comment for Marcus. "I move to table this discussion," another board member called out. "And I suggest we instead examine our membership policies to ensure they reflect the values Mrs. Whitmore so eloquently reminded us of." "Seconded," came several voices at once. Marcus felt Emily's grip tighten on his hand. He glanced back at her, seeing hope bloom across her face like the first rays of sunrise. Evelyn caught his eye from across the table and gave him a small, knowing nod. The murmurs grew louder as more members began openly expressing their support for Marcus and their shame at having stayed silent before. Charles sat rigid in his chair, his authority visibly diminishing with each passing moment, his expression growing darker as he watched his carefully orchestrated plan unravel before his eyes. Marcus rose slowly from his chair, his military training evident in his straight posture and dignified bearing. The boardroom fell silent, every eye fixed on him. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished table. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," he began, his voice steady and clear. "I stand before you not just as a veteran, but as a father." He glanced at Emily, who sat beside Evelyn, her small hands folded neatly in her lap. "When I served overseas, I carried a picture of my wife Sarah and our baby Emily. That picture reminded me what I was fighting for, a future where every child could grow up free and proud of who they are." His voice softened as he spoke of Sarah, the love still evident in his tone. "Before Sarah passed, she made me promise something. She said, 'Marcus, don't let anyone tell our daughter where she belongs. Show her.'" Charles shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but Marcus continued, his words gaining strength. "Sarah believed in people. She believed in community. She taught me that true belonging isn't about fitting in, it's about being accepted for who you are." Marcus pulled out a worn photograph from his wallet. "This is Emily's first day of kindergarten. Sarah was already sick then, but she insisted on being there." He held up the photo, showing a smiling Emily in pigtails, Sarah's thin but radiant face beside her. "My wife's last wish wasn't for wealth or status. It was for her daughter to grow up knowing her worth." Several board members leaned forward, their expressions softening. An older gentleman dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. "I joined this club because I believed in its stated values of family, honor, and community," Marcus continued. "Emily deserves to be part of a community that sees her heart, not just her appearance. That's all any child deserves." Mr. Thompson, a silver-haired member who'd been quiet until now, suddenly stood. "I've been a member here for 40 years, he announced, his voice gruff with emotion. "My father fought in World War II, and he taught me that character matters more than anything else. I've watched Marcus and his daughter since they joined. They exemplify everything this club should stand for." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Mrs. Henderson, known for her careful neutrality in club politics, rose next. "I second that," she declared firmly. "I've seen Emily helping younger children at the pool, always with a kind word. That's the sort of member we need." Charles's face reddened as more members stood. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "We have traditions." "Traditions of exclusion?" another member interrupted. "Times change, Charles. Maybe it's time we did too." The chairman of the board, Mr. Roberts, cleared his throat. "I believe we've heard enough to call for a vote." He adjusted his glasses, looking around the room. "The motion before us is Mr. Whitmore's proposal to revoke Mr. Johnson's membership. All those in favor?" Only Charles and a handful of his closest allies raised their hands. The room felt heavy with anticipation. "All those opposed?" A forest of hands shot up. Emily gasped softly as she counted them, her eyes wide with wonder. Evelyn squeezed her shoulder gently, a proud smile on her face. Mr. Roberts nodded solemnly. "The motion is defeated by a clear majority. Furthermore," he continued, fixing Charles with a stern look, "I believe this board should formally apologize to Mr. Johnson and his daughter for any distress they've experienced." The chairman turned to Marcus. "Mr. Johnson, your membership stands. More than that, you and Emily have reminded us what this club should truly represent. Thank you." Marcus bowed his head slightly, emotion tightening his throat. Emily slipped from her chair and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. He lifted her up, holding her close, as several members approached to shake his hand and welcome them properly, finally, to the club they'd fought so hard to be part of. Charles slumped in his chair, his face ashen, as his carefully maintained power structure crumbled around him. The board members who had once jumped at his commands now turned their backs, gathering instead around Marcus and Emily, their true colors finally showing in the warm smiles and genuine welcomes they offered. Mr. Roberts raised his gavel. "The vote is recorded. This meeting is adjourned." The morning after the board meeting, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, sipping coffee and reading the local business newspaper. His eyes widened at the headline, "Country Club Controversy. CEO's Leadership Questioned." He set his mug down carefully, his hands trembling slightly. Emily bounded into the kitchen, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Daddy, can we go to the club pool this weekend?" The fear that usually accompanied such requests was gone from her voice. "Sure can, sweetheart." He smiled, folding the paper away. "Let's have breakfast first." As the days passed, the ripples from the board meeting spread far beyond the club's marble walls. At the prestigious Chamber of Commerce lunch, businessmen who once laughed at Charles's jokes now turned away from his table. The whispers grew louder with each passing day. "Did you hear about the veteran he tried to kick out? Shameful behavior. Not the kind of leadership we need." Charles's phone rang less frequently. Meeting requests went unanswered. His secretary began scheduling fewer appointments, and longtime associates suddenly found their calendars full when he called. At his corporate office, Charles slammed down his phone after another canceled meeting. "This is ridiculous," he shouted to his empty corner office. 20 years of relationships, all because of one." He couldn't finish the sentence, his face red with fury. Meanwhile, Lillian's carefully cultivated social circle began to crumble. At her weekly tennis match, her usual partners claimed injuries or prior commitments. The charity committee she'd chaired for 5 years suddenly decided to restructure their leadership. The final straw came during the annual Garden Club luncheon. Lillian, wearing her finest sundress and a wide-brimmed hat, swept into the country club's garden terrace as if nothing had changed. But instead of her usual warm welcome, she found cool stares and turned backs. "Well," she announced loudly, her voice shrill with forced confidence, "I suppose some people just don't understand the importance of maintaining certain standards." She glared pointedly at a group of women who had recently defended Marcus. One of the women, Susan Parker, stood up slowly. "You're right, Lillian. Standards are important. Like kindness, decency, and not bullying 8-year-old children." Lillian's face flushed deep red. "How dare you? That man and his daughter have no business." "That man is a decorated veteran who served our country," another woman interrupted. "And his daughter is a delightful child who showed more grace under your cruelty than you've shown in your entire life." Lillian's carefully manicured hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. "I won't stand for this insolence." Her voice rose to a screech. "Do you know who I am? Who my husband is?" "Yes," Susan replied calmly. "And that's precisely the problem." The scene quickly became the talk of the club. By sunset, everyone had heard about Lillian's meltdown, how she'd knocked over a water pitcher in her rage, how she'd threatened to destroy anyone who sided against her, how she'd finally stormed out in tears when no one came to her defense. That evening, Evelyn sat in her garden with Marcus and Emily, sharing fresh-baked cookies as the sun set. Emily was showing off her math test, proudly explaining how she'd solved each problem. 98%? Evelyn exclaimed, genuinely impressed. "You're quite the mathematician, dear." Emily beamed, then grew serious. "Grandma Evelyn, I heard some kids talking about Mr. Charles and Mrs. Lillian today. They seemed sad." Evelyn's face softened. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people forget what really matters. They think fancy clothes and important titles make them better than others. But do you know what really makes someone special?" Emily shook her head, cookie crumbs dotting her chin. "Kindness," Evelyn said firmly. "Treating others with respect, standing up for what's right, like your daddy did." Marcus watched his daughter absorb these words, amazed at how much she'd grown through this ordeal. The fear and shame that had clouded her eyes weeks ago had been replaced by quiet confidence. "You know," Evelyn continued, reaching for both their hands, "light always overcomes darkness. Goodness always outshines cruelty. It might take time, but love wins in the end." She squeezed their hands gently. "You two showed everyone that truth." The evening breeze carried the sweet scent of jasmine as they sat together. 3 generations united by something stronger than blood. The courage to stand for what's right, the wisdom to choose love over hate, and the faith that goodness would prevail. Emily leaned against Marcus's shoulder, contentment written across her young face. For the first time since this all began, Marcus felt complete peace about their place in this community. They belonged here not because anyone said they could, but because they had earned it through dignity, grace, and unwavering courage. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the country club's sprawling lawn as Marcus and Emily made their way toward the annual summer picnic. The air was sweet, with the scent of barbecue and fresh-cut grass. Emily walked beside her father, wearing her favorite yellow sundress, her hand tucked safely in his. "Look at all the balloons, Daddy." Emily pointed to the colorful clusters dotting the landscape. Her voice carried none of the hesitation that had become so familiar in recent months. Marcus squeezed her hand gently, noticing how different everything felt. Gone were the sideways glances and whispered comments. Instead, genuine smiles greeted them as they walked through the gathering. Mrs. Henderson, who taught piano at the local elementary school, waved warmly. "Marcus, Emily, we saved you spots at the main table." She gestured to a red checkered tablecloth spread beneath a massive oak tree. "Thank you," Marcus replied, his voice steady but his heart racing at the simple kindness of the gesture. They hadn't made it halfway to the table when a group of children came running over, their faces bright with excitement. Leading them was Sarah, a girl from Emily's class who had never spoken to her before. "Emily, Emily," Sarah called out, slightly out of breath. "We're playing Capture the Flag. Want to join our team?" Marcus felt Emily's hand tighten in his for just a moment, an old reflex born of too many rejections. But then something beautiful happened. She looked up at her father, her eyes sparkling with hope. "Can I go play, Daddy?" Marcus knelt down beside her, straightening the bow in her hair. "Of course, sweetheart. Have fun." Emily's smile could have lit up the darkest night. She joined the group of children, who immediately surrounded her, chattering excitedly about their game strategy. Marcus watched as they ran off together, Emily's laughter mixing with the others in perfect harmony. "That's quite a daughter you have there, Marcus," came a deep voice beside him. It was Mr. Thompson, a retired judge and long-time club member. He extended his hand. "And might I say, you've taught us all something important these past few weeks." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, sir. Though I think Emily's the one who's been teaching us all along." More members approached as Marcus made his way to the picnic table. Each interaction felt genuine, stripped of the artificial politeness that had once masked their prejudice. Mrs. Bailey, who organized the club's charity events, touched his arm gently. "We needed this wake-up call," she said softly. "Sometimes it takes seeing ourselves through someone else's eyes to remember what matters." From his seat at the table, Marcus had a clear view of the children's game. Emily was running with abandon, her hair flying behind her, completely uninhibited. She tagged another player and jumped with joy, accepting high fives from her teammates. Dr. Richards, whose grandson was playing with Emily, sat down beside Marcus with 2 plates of barbecue. "Here," he said, passing one over. "Can't let this get cold." He paused, watching the children play. "You know, my grandson came home last week asking why anyone would ever be mean to Emily. Said she was the kindest person in his class." He shook his head. "Out of the mouths of babes, right?" Marcus nodded, emotion thick in his throat. He thought of all the nights he'd stayed up worrying about Emily's future, all the times he'd questioned whether he was doing the right thing by keeping their club membership. His late wife had always insisted on facing challenges head-on, believing that change only came through persistence and grace. The afternoon wore on, filled with easy conversation and genuine laughter. Marcus found himself relaxing truly for the first time since that terrible day in the dining room. Even Evelyn's absence, she was visiting her sister in Florida, didn't dampen the warmth of the gathering. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow across the lawn, Emily came running back to where Marcus Saturday. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement, and her eyes danced with joy. "Daddy," she called out, slightly out of breath. "Daddy, they want me to sit with them." She pointed to a table where several children were gathering for ice cream. "Sarah said they saved me a special seat." Marcus knelt down and opened his arms. Emily flew into them, her small body trembling with happiness. He held her close, breathing in the scent of sunshine and grass in her hair, feeling the rapid beat of her heart against his chest. In that moment, all the struggle, all the pain, all the uncertainty, it had all been worth it for this single precious moment of belonging. This was what his wife had seen all along. This was what she had meant about showing Emily where she belonged. Not by avoiding difficult places or running from challenges, but by standing firm with dignity until others could see the truth that had always been there. That every child deserves to be welcomed, that every heart has room to grow, that belonging is not about fitting in but about being accepted for exactly who you are. Twinkling lights draped across the country club's grand ballroom ceiling, casting a warm glow over the festive Christmas decorations below. Elegant garlands of deep green pine and shimmering gold ribbon wrapped around white columns, while red poinsettias dotted the tables. The scene looked like something from a fairy tale. Marcus adjusted his bow tie, standing tall in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo. Beside him, Emily practically bounced with excitement in her new red velvet dress, her hair styled in neat braids adorned with matching ribbons. Her eyes sparkled as she took in the magical atmosphere. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Marcus said softly, his heart swelling with pride. Emily beamed up at him. "You look handsome too, Daddy." She smoothed her dress for the 100th time, clearly relishing how the fabric swished around her knees. From across the room, Evelyn approached them, elegant in a silver evening gown. Her face lit up at the sight of Emily, and she opened her arms wide. "There's my precious girl." Emily rushed forward to embrace her, careful not to wrinkle either of their dresses. "Grandma Evelyn, you look like a princess." Evelyn laughed warmly, taking Emily's small hand in hers. "Well, thank you, darling, but you're the true princess tonight." She winked at Marcus. "Your father's not looking too shabby either." Marcus smiled, touched by how natural their relationship had become. In just a few months, Evelyn had filled a void in Emily's life that he hadn't even realized was there. She treated his daughter with such genuine love and pride, as if Emily truly were her own grandchild. They made their way to the head table, where place cards marked their seats of honor. Emily's eyes widened when she saw her name written in elegant gold script. "Look, Daddy, we're sitting right here at the front." "That's right," Evelyn said, helping Emily into her chair. "The guest of honor needs the best seat in the house." Marcus watched as other club members stopped by to greet them warmly. There was no trace of the cold shoulders or whispered comments from months ago. Instead, genuine smiles and kind words flowed freely. Several children waved excitedly to Emily, who waved back with growing confidence. As they settled in for dinner, Marcus felt a familiar warmth in his chest, the same feeling he got when thinking about his late wife. He could almost hear her voice. "See, I told you to show her where she belongs." His eyes grew misty as he watched Emily chatting animatedly with Evelyn about her school's upcoming Christmas pageant. The meal was elegant: tender roast beef, perfectly seasoned vegetables, and warm dinner rolls that Emily particularly enjoyed. Throughout dinner, Marcus noticed how naturally Emily handled herself, using the right fork for each course and remembering to place her napkin in her lap. She was growing up so fast, becoming such a poised young lady. When dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate cake with raspberry sauce, Emily caught Marcus watching her and gave him a bright smile that reminded him so much of her mother. He reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "Are you having fun, baby girl?" "The most fun ever, Daddy. Can we dance later?" "Of course we can." As if on cue, the orchestra began tuning their instruments. The soft sounds of violins filled the air as the dance floor lights dimmed slightly. Evelyn touched Marcus's arm gently. "You should take her out there for the first dance," she suggested warmly. "I think she's been waiting all evening." Marcus stood and offered his hand to Emily with an exaggerated bow. "May I have this dance, Miss Johnson?" Emily giggled and placed her small hand in his. "Yes, you may, Mr. Johnson." Together, they walked to the center of the dance floor as the orchestra began playing "What a Wonderful World." Marcus lifted Emily onto his shoes, just as he used to do when she was smaller, and they began to sway to the music. The crystal chandeliers above seemed to twinkle in time with the music as they turned slowly. Emily's face glowed with joy as she looked up at her father, completely at ease in this moment that once might have seemed impossible. "Daddy," she whispered, "remember when that mean lady said we didn't belong here?" Marcus nodded, his throat tight with emotion. She was wrong, wasn't she? We belong wherever we want to belong. That's right, baby girl. And don't you ever forget it. They continued to dance beneath the sparkling lights, father and daughter moving as one, their shadows casting gentle patterns on the polished floor. Other couples joined them, but Marcus barely noticed. In this perfect moment, it was just him and his daughter, wrapped in the love that had carried them through every storm. The orchestra's melody swelled beautifully around them as they twirled, Emily's red dress fanning out like a flower in bloom. Her laughter, pure and free, rang out above the music, the sound of a child who knew exactly where she belonged. The music faded to its final notes as Marcus and Emily completed their dance, their feet coming to a gentle stop on the polished floor. The Christmas lights above cast a soft, ethereal glow around them, making Emily's eyes shimmer like stars. She looked up at her father, her face radiating pure joy and something deeper, a newfound confidence that made Marcus's heart soar. "Daddy," Emily said, her voice clear and strong, so different from the timid whisper of months ago. "They can't tell us where we belong anymore. We already know." Marcus felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He knelt down to her level, remembering all the nights he'd worried, all the prayers he'd whispered, all the times he'd wondered if he was doing right by his little girl. Now, looking at her radiant face, he saw not just his daughter, but a glimpse of the strong young woman she was becoming. "You're right, baby girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He pulled her into a warm embrace, feeling her small arms wrapped tightly around his neck. The scent of her hair ribbons mixed with the pine garlands surrounding them. "You've always belonged, exactly as you are. Don't ever let anyone make you think different." Emily nestled her face against his shoulder, and Marcus could feel her smile. "I know, Daddy. You showed me." Around them, other couples continued to dance, their movements creating a gentle swirl of evening gowns and tuxedos. But in that moment, father and daughter stood in their own bubble of perfect understanding. The same room that had once witnessed their humiliation now bore testament to their triumph. "My two favorite people," came Evelyn's warm voice as she approached them. She wore an elegant emerald green gown, her silver hair perfectly styled, and her face glowing with grandmotherly affection. She placed one hand on Marcus's shoulder and the other on Emily's back, completing their circle. Emily reached out and caught Evelyn's hand, squeezing it. "Grandma Evelyn, did you see us dancing?" "I certainly did," Evelyn replied, her eyes twinkling. "You look just like a princess out there." Marcus straightened up, keeping one hand on Emily's shoulder as he smiled at Evelyn. The older woman had become more than just an ally. She was family now, in all the ways that truly mattered. Her presence had helped heal wounds he hadn't even known were still bleeding. "Thank you," he said softly to Evelyn, meaning far more than just the compliment about their dancing. Evelyn understood, as she always did. "No, thank you both. You've brought so much light back into this place." She gestured around the ballroom where members chatted and laughed, where children of all backgrounds played together near the enormous Christmas tree, where the stiffness and prejudice that had once ruled had given way to genuine warmth. Emily tugged at Marcus's hand. "Daddy, look at the tree. It's even prettier than last year." The massive Christmas tree dominated one corner of the ballroom, its thousands of white lights reflecting off golden ornaments and crystal icicles. Beneath it, presents were piled high, not just decorative boxes, but real gifts for local children in need, a new tradition Emily had helped start. "It sure is, sweetheart," Marcus agreed. He remembered how, just months ago, Emily had been pushed away from a table in this very room. Now she moved through the space with easy confidence, greeting friends, helping younger children, belonging in every way that mattered. The orchestra began a new song, something soft and sweet that floated through the air like snowflakes. Couples returned to the dance floor, their movements graceful and unhurried. The golden light from the chandeliers mixed with the twinkling Christmas lights, creating an almost magical atmosphere. "Would you like to dance with your old grandma?" Evelyn asked Emily with a playful wink. Emily's face lit up. "Yes, please." She took Evelyn's hand, then paused to look back at Marcus. "Is it okay, Daddy?" "Of course it is," Marcus said, his heart full as he watched his daughter lead Evelyn onto the dance floor. They began to sway to the music, Emily occasionally standing on Evelyn's toes as they moved, both of them laughing freely. Marcus stood back, taking in the scene before him. The ballroom sparkled with holiday cheer, but nothing shone brighter than his daughter's smile. She was right. They knew exactly where they belonged now. Not because anyone had granted them permission, but because they had claimed their place with dignity, grace, and unshakable faith. Watching Emily and Evelyn dance beneath the twinkling lights, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. They had faced darkness and emerged stronger, turned enemies into friends, and built a family that transcended blood. In Emily's joy, in Evelyn's love, in the warmth of acceptance that now filled the room, he saw everything he and his late wife had ever dreamed of for their daughter. They belonged here, all of them together, beneath the sparkling lights of Christmas, their hearts full and their spirits unbroken. It was a picture of triumph, not just over prejudice, but over fear itself, a living testament to the power of love, courage, and unwavering dignity. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Marcus Johnson, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.